Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome, everyone, to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. I want to be positive and happy, but my parents are negative and verbally abusive. I know they are functioning from ego and are deluded, but it still hurts as they are my parents. I'm currently staying with them, and it is making me demotivated and upset about life in general. I am also their only child, so I cannot leave them. What do I do to keep me detached from the negative environment? One of the hardest relationships to navigate in this world is the relationship with our parents. We go from, as young children, believing that they are everything, that they're perfect. Not only perfect, but that they are infinite, that they are truly the divine on earth. And then as we grow, we start to see them with different issues they may have, different problems they may have. And it's always very interesting the moment that we realize our parents are actually human. And when we are older and struggling with issues from our childhood, issues of our parents, it's always very, very interesting and important to remember that in most cases, your parents were 20s when they had you. They're kids. They're kids, right? But as kids, they seem like everything. And so when they treat us in a certain way or tell us something, it's not just, oh, my mom or my dad said this. We take it really as truth. Now, in this case, the question asker is in kind of a double bind situation, because being with anyone who's always negative, even if they're not parents, even if it's a colleague, someone you share an office space with, or a roommate, or someone else you have to interact with on a daily basis, that's bad enough. Or a family member in the home, bad enough. But when it's your parents, it has that double-edged sword to it, because there's the energy of negativity that anyway grates on us, that anyway impacts us. And then, of course, there's the sense when they say things that even though, as a young adult, as this question asker is, or even as an older adult, even when we can look at our parents and say, as she says, I know they're just functioning from ego and deluded, but nonetheless, when they're verbally abusive, and it's your parents, we take that in, even when our mind says we shouldn't. Nonetheless, we take that in. And this is where it's really important to understand that when we talk about compassion, and we talk about loving kindness, and we talk about care, and we talk about seva, that you are not left out of humanity. So we teach compassion for all, loving kindness for all. There's beautiful meditation practices of getting in touch with compassion, with loving kindness, with giving it out to the world. You are included in that world. When we talk about in service, in seva of humanity, well, it's not humanity minus you. It's not serve all except yourself. Have compassion and love for all except for yourself. But we usually tend to think that. We've got these double standards that are not only incorrect spiritually, psychologically, but that handicap us. To serve others is beautiful. Yes, we should serve as much as we can. But when it comes to taking care of ourselves, we feel like that's selfish. That we shouldn't. That we should only take care of others. And yet, if you look at all of the spiritual literature, it's all focused on your attention to yourself, your capital S self. Not the lowercase s self, not your ego. It's not my likes, my dislikes, my fears, my desires, my ego. But your capital S self, that truth of who you are. That divine within you. That perfection within you. And if we allow ourselves to be in situations where we are constantly being harmed, harm is not only physical, harm is emotional. And where we are constantly being harmed, the very nature of who we are is being pushed away, insulted, harmed. Well, we have a responsibility then to take care of our capital S self. Right? Those of you who have been coming to Satsang for a while or watch them know that in general my advice in relationship issues is always to figure it out. To choose peace, to choose love, to make it work. To recognize that you're carrying your own self with you, and whatever ego it is that's making this situation unlivable, well, it'll just make the next situation also unlivable. And yet, you'll know that there are certain circumstances in which I pretty much always say, the problem here is not you, the problem is the situation. And those are times of abuse. Physical, sexual, emotional. There are times in which the way to solve a situation is not to ask, how can I find peace in the midst of this? But rather to ask, how can I change this? It's the same thing that I've shared. It's a different subject, but the same idea where when you look at, I was having a lot of this in America when President Trump was president and there was a lot going on in the country, and I would have a lot of people say to me, how do I find peace in the midst of this situation, in the midst of this oppressive situation? And my answer always was what the present moment is asking of us. And aside from political levels, we look at war across the world. We look at the environmental destruction. We look at climate change. We look at oppression of women. We look at starving children. Well, the solution to situations like that is not, how can I just find peace in the midst of all of this? But rather, how can I change that? I need to have enough peace that I'm able to go to sleep at night, get up in the morning and eat my food, have my focus and attention grounded and anchored so that I can be an instrument of the divine flow. And I need to, of course, be connected to that capital P perfection, that divine perfection, even in the midst of so much to be done in the world. But the peace that I experience is not the end. It's the means to the end. It's the means to be able to serve as that vehicle of the divine flow. Because if I'm not in peace, then I'm not a very effective instrument of peace. So, in this situation, similar to situations like environmental destruction and climate change and oppression, the answer is not simply, how do you find peace in a situation of abuse? But rather, how do you ground and anchor yourself in enough inner peace that you know, number one, regardless of what they say, it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change the perfection and divinity of you, even when it's your parents saying it. And you need to know that. Really, really, really know that. Not just with words like ego and delusion, but really know that it isn't true. And then you need, in that peace, in that grounding, to actually figure out how you're going to get out of that situation. Because that is not a healthy situation for you. If your parents both had contagious illnesses and you were immunosuppressed, no one would say, oh, you know, the best thing you can do is stay in that house so that you can get sick and die. And that by leaving the house, you're somehow a bad son or daughter. We understand that in order to be an instrument of love, of peace in the world, I have to be alive, number one. I have to be healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I have to be free. Free from external oppression as well as from the games of my own mind. And this situation is a situation really of an externally oppressive situation. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that we abandon our parents, especially as the only child. I'm an only child as well. And yet, as a child, we have many dharmas. We all have many dharmas. We have a dharma as a child to our parents. If we're married, we have a dharma as a spouse to our spouse. If we have children, we have the dharma of being the parent to the children. We have our dharma in our livelihood. But we also have our dharma of waking up, of discovering and knowing who we are. Experiencing that, finding that, living that, manifesting that. Because it's not just an intellectual experience, an intellectual awareness. It's actually a blossoming and flowering of self. And so what you need to do is figure out a way that your parents can be taken care of. I don't know how old they are. I don't know what their situation is. But they can be taken care of in a way that isn't harming you. Maybe you want to begin by telling them simply how much it hurts you. Give them a chance. See if the situation can change. Sit them down. Maybe bring in a respected member of the community. Maybe a religious leader. Maybe a good friend of theirs who you trust. Bring in someone who can really help them understand how their way of being is harming you, and of course harming them as well. See if you can get them to change. Give it some time. But if not, then let's troubleshoot a way for them to be able to be cared for you to be able to fulfill your dharma as the child, and as a loving child, while not sacrificing your dharma to yourself. Because life should not be an either-or situation. It should be a yes-and situation. And it's not easy, but that's something that so many of us are called upon to navigate, is how do we navigate that? But it's something that we all need to figure out, because dharmas should never be either or. It should always be yes and. So try to see if you can get them to change. And then if not, let me know again. Reach back out and let's see if we can troubleshoot something else.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. You say inner anger, but of course all anger is inner. We may let it out outside, right? It's like my food poisoning is inner, but if you're standing too close, I might throw up on you. But the food poisoning is still from the inside. So it's all inner, but we tend to sadly let it out on others. And yeah, sometimes it's rage. I can tell you, first of all, the way not to deal with it. And it's interesting because I have a background in Western psychology, where many, many schools of psychology are rooted in this idea that anger is something like food poisoning, where basically you just need to kind of throw up for a little while or diarrhea for a little while and clear yourself out, and then you are done. drink some water, get a good night's sleep, and it's over. Unfortunately, anger isn't like that. And what a lot of those systems of psychology are rooted in is this idea of somehow we need to get it out. And what so many people have realized, and I've realized it as both a recipient of and a provider of, so on both sides, of this type of therapy, is it doesn't work. Yes, you feel much better in the moment. You feel lighter, there's a nice adrenaline rush, there's some endorphins going. You feel better. But you're no less likely to be angry next week. And in fact, interestingly, you're more likely. And in Indian culture and tradition, we speak about something called sanskaras, which the closest thing in the West that we use for that is, you could say, neural networks or neural programming. The way that our brains fire habitually, a habit that we have. What we now know is that the more temper tantrums you throw, the more likely you are to throw temper tantrums. The more times you punch a hole through the wall, the more likely you are to punch holes through walls. It's not like, oh, I did it once, now I'm done, thank God. But actually, every time you do that, it lays the sanskara for, oh, this is how I deal with anger. And in the future, until you have done that, the anger doesn't seem to subside. So instead, the way to deal with anger is, first of all, it sounds like it's something that you're really struggling with. I would identify it first. What's the source? Chances are it's going to be something in the past. Likely the root is going to be something from childhood. It just is that things that happen in the first 10, 15 years of our lives tend to impact us much more strongly in a fundamental way than things that happen after. There's a whole science around brain waves and brain formation that I won't go into, but just that tends to form the basis for a lot. But go back. When was the first time you remember being filled with rage? Ask yourself that. Because rage that he's asked about, it's different from the run-of-the-mill anger of like, somebody was rude to me and so I insulted them. Rage is different. Rage is the volcano that's bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and burning you on the inside until it actually erupts. And with rage, erupt it will. There's no option. Exactly when, exactly where, no one knows. But it will erupt. Unless, of course, you stuff it down with drugs or alcohol, which tend to be the solution that so many people go to with that type of rage. But of course, we know that doesn't work either. So, first of all, just try to understand yourself, that lowercase s self. Where did it come from? That's not going to cure it, but it's going to give you some insight. Oh yeah, I remember. And that'll give you some insight into a pattern. And then you'll get some insight into the sorts of things that make you angry, because they will all form that type of pattern. They'll all be kind of in line with whatever that initial real rage is. Then, once you know that, and you start to become a little bit aware of your triggers, as you're moving through the world, you'll notice it as anger starts to come. This is the benefit of a meditation practice. Aside from, moving toward enlightenment, moving toward awakening, moving toward God realization, aside from that, aside from the destination, along the journey, as we become more and more mindful, you learn to do what Puja Swamiji, my guru, calls grab the space. That space between the thought and the action. The thought arises of anger, and then it's going to bubble into yelling, into screaming, into punching, into acting out. And you start to find that space. And then you start to be able to see anger kind of coming at you from a distance. I'm about to get angry, and you feel it. You feel it kind of, it's like someone lit a fire under you. And the heat is sort of starting to rise. You start to feel kind of a compression in the chest. The vision becomes very narrow. And you notice it. And you start to notice it when it's still quite far away. So that's step 2, is being able to notice it before it's a wave that has crashed on you. And then step 3 is to recognize that it really just is a wave. Emotions, even rage, are waves. They're waves of energy. And if you've ever swum in the ocean, what you know is that the way to deal with waves is not to try to ignore them or outrun them. The way to deal with waves when it comes is either to allow yourself to kind of gently float up and then you gently float down. Or, as the wave comes, if you're on the wrong side of the wave where you're not going to be able to just go up with it, you're on the beach side of the wave, you dive down. You go deep and the wave crashes over you. And so when you notice it coming, just sit down. Just sit down. Sit on your hands if you have to. Close your eyes. Bring the awareness to your breath. Bring it very, very low. Low in the abdomen. Below your navel. Draw that awareness of the breath there. As slow and long breaths as you can. And just feel that wave rising. And it's okay, it's rising, it's just a wave. And just notice it. Keep breathing. Don't allow the mind to get into a drama around it. What the mind likes to do is to get into a drama. How dare he? I'll show her. Don't let the mind get into the drama. Keep the mind focused on the breath. And just allow that wave of emotion, that wave of energy to come. No drama, no lines, no history, no stories. Just the emotion. It'll rise, it'll rise, it'll rise, it'll rise, and it'll crash like a wave on the beach. And it'll go out. And you'll notice you're still sitting there, still breathing. And the wave is over. But in order to do that, you got to catch it while it's still at a bit of a distance. And that's where the meditative practice comes in. Because otherwise, by the time you know you're angry, you've already punched the wall. So you want to develop this practice of mindfulness. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't run from it. It's not dark. It's not bad. It's not evil. It's a very, very natural response when things happen in our lives, when we're young, that we're angry about. Anger's not the problem. The problem is that we allow it to take control of our hands and our legs and our mouth. If we allow it just to be there, it'll rise, it'll crash, and it'll go. And then what you'll find slowly, slowly is it loses its power over you. It loses its power, and then the farther out you're able to see it, then the next step is that you're able to stop it from that distance. You can see it, you can bow to it. Hi, anger, I see you coming. But you know what? I actually don't have time today. I've got something else on the agenda. Maybe next week. Give me a call on Saturday. And instead you engage in something full of love, whatever it may be. If you're walking down the street when it happens, find yourself a homeless person, buy him a hamburger, a sandwich. Right? Buy him a burrito. Feed a homeless person. Buy him a sweater. If you're with someone you love, give them a hug. If they're the one you're angry at, give yourself a hug. Whatever you need to do. But do something in love, because that will dissipate that energy of anger. And it doesn't matter whether you are angry at person A and loving person C. The love for person C will counteract the anger at person A. The two energies can't exist simultaneously. And so you learn then to just shift the energy into love. Really, random homeless person. Give him a sandwich. Just that moment of love. It'll shift your energy entirely.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with Inspiration and Transformation. I am trying to follow the path of devotion, but due to some reason, I suffer from deep resentment, fear, and self-hatred. I read scriptures, but nothing in Shastras is written about self-love. If it is, then please guide me. How, in service of a loving God, can I fully love myself with all my imperfections? The Shastras, in a way, you could say they are all about self-love. But they're about self-love of the capital S self. So all of our scriptures are guiding us to the true self. They're all about overcoming ignorance, about letting go of illusion, all about learning to find the true self. If you read the Upanishads, right, each of them in its own way is a different way of pointing us back inside to that which is real, that which is true, that which is eternal, that which is not born or dies, not changing, but actually that which is the truth. So, although it doesn't speak about self-love per se in those terms, it's all about love your capital S self. That's why you need to discover it. That's why you need to know it. If it weren't divine, if it weren't lovable, why would you spend your whole life learning about it? Why would you spend your whole life looking for it? Nobody ever would say, I have an idea. Spend the next 60, 70 years of your life looking for something. And by the way, it's really, right? If you're going to guide somebody to spend their entire lives looking for something, discovering something, obviously, that something is very special and beautiful. Otherwise, why bother? If that which you're going to find at the end of your lifelong search, the end of all your hours of sadhana, is not so nice, could be a lot better, why would we do that? So, by nature of the fact that we are being guided to spend our lives, our time, our energy, discovering the true self, inherent in that instruction is the fact that self is not only lovable, but is everything, is the divine. But what this beautiful questioner is referring to, though, isn't the capital S self. It's the lowercase s self. Because when we talk about the capital S self, there are no imperfections. Our divine self, the soul, the spirit, has no imperfections. So when she speaks about resentment and pain from something that's happened in her past, it's a lowercase s self that she's talking about. And the dilemma with that is that we get focused on the imperfections of this lowercase s self, the ego self, the temporary, that which is born, that which dies, that which changes, this body, this story. Well, remember that self is human, right? We have two selves. We have the capital S self that's divine, never born, never dies, what Bhagwan Krishna speaks about in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Cannot be wet by water or cut by knives or dried by the wind, burned with fire. So we've got that self that is eternal, that is divine. And then we've got our lowercase s self, which is our human self. Now, when we realize and remember it's human, by nature it's imperfect. Anything that is always changing by nature has to be imperfect. Because if it's perfect and it changes, then by definition it wouldn't be perfect anymore. So that which is constantly changing by definition can't be perfect and eternal. So our human self, of course, is imperfect. That's why we're here. It's why we've taken birth. We're all here because we are working out some karmic package. We've got karmic debts of our previous births that we're here to work through. Some sweet fruit to eat, some not so sweet fruit to eat. By nature, the human self is a composition of that which we've learned, that which has happened to us, our families of origin, our cultures of origin, our experiences. They all create what we call sanskaras, or impressions, or patterns. Sometimes they become deep, we call them neuroses, pathologies. But it's all created by impressions that have been formed upon us, of people around us, experiences we've had, things that we've learned from the world, taken in from the world. So when you say you're imperfect, of course you are. You're human. Welcome to the human race. Nobody ever says, this human self must be perfect. What you offer to God is the imperfection of the humanness, with the awareness that God is perfect, which means that if God has created you, in God's eyes you are perfect. We see imperfections. Too tall, too short, too fat, too skinny, too dark, too fair, too this, too that. Get angry too much. Lose my temper, feel jealous, have depression, get frustrated, I'm lazy. And it's good to be aware of those things so that then we can work on them. But God isn't up there judging you. Because what God is seeing is God in you. So remember that in every moment that you're looking at your imperfections, you're literally saying, well, if I'm imperfect, it means God's imperfect, right? Because God's created me. And if I believe that God is perfect, then I have to believe that at least in God's eyes, I am perfect. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. I love that. Yes, you are. No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yes, you are. And don't allow the past resentment, the past pain, to bind you today. That's your work that you've got to let that go. You've got to forgive. Forgive yourself, forgive others, forgive the universe. Whatever that experience was, you've had it, you've learned from it, it's changed you. Let it go. Not the lessons, keep the lessons, but let go of the resentment, let go of the pain, let go of the anger. I know the asker of this question, so I know that you have heard me speak so many times about my personal experience with that and how important it is to let go. And that we all can, not because what happened is okay, but because we deserve to be free. And all of the pain and all of the resentment and all of the grudges and all of the anger actually keeps us from being free. So whether it's something that you've done that you're feeling guilty about, whether it's something someone else did that you're feeling angry and a grudge about, either way, it's keeping you stuck. So you offer the imperfections to God. You offer everything to God with the awareness that God, the perfect, accepts it all. Not only accepts it, wants it, is waiting for us to come to God, to offer ourselves to God. As Pujya Swamiji always says, God doesn't open your old files. That when you go to God, whatever the past is, it's over. That all God is waiting for is for you to go to God with full surrender. And that God doesn't open the old file. So God's not going to go back and say, this thing. And so you need to let yourself become free of that. And to know that today you are this extraordinary, divine, amazing being. And whatever happened in the past has been a lesson, an impression. And now how to take that and be even stronger, even deeper, even more aware, even more compassionate. And offer it all to God. If He refuses to accept it, you come back and let me know. But He won't. I promise.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. We forget because of what's called the divine Leela, God's play. It's the only explanation. And I say this to you as both a scientist and a spiritual person. There is absolutely no other rational explanation for why we forget the truth of who we are. Because then, of course, there's the whole other question, which is, well, if we're all infinite and one with God, why even bother with this drama? Right? I mean, why even take a body? Why bother? If the whole point is to get free of this cycle of birth and death, well then, why bother? And the only answer that makes any sense from any perspective is just the idea that this is God's play. That the one consciously, purposely, voluntarily becomes many for the joy of becoming one again. Have you ever been in a relationship where you find yourself, usually a romantic one, where you find yourself kind of for no reason making fights? Like things are going really well, and then suddenly, for really no reason at all, you start kind of instigating a fight. And if you're insightful and contemplative, what you realize is we do that because the making up after a fight feels so good that when things were just feeling like, yeah, everything's good, I'm good, he's good, she's good, we're happy, it feels boring when we have that yearning for excitement, you could say, passion, you could say. And so we instigate these little fights because we know, yeah, we'll get over it and then we'll make up. And in that making up, you've come back to where you were before. But there's actually something that feels even better about it. Right? Here you are together again, but you were together before the fight. But nonetheless, it feels better now that the pot's been stirred up. And so when I hear about the divine Leela, I think, all right, well, so maybe God is looking for that joy of the many becoming one again. Yeah, we're all one. But if we forget, then it's like that divine situation of kind of having a fight with the beloved for no real reason other than to come back together. And so that's why we forget. And of course, there's different, stories and scriptures about different, times and how it happens and where the memory of who we are gets buried inside of us. But those stories are religion specific. And when you think about an eternal truth, you think about something that doesn't require that you accept or adopt a particular story or a particular book or a particular prayer or a particular incarnation of the divine. And the idea of Leela is really kind of universal. It means God's played this with all of us. It's not that just Hindus have forgotten, because we talk about it like that in Hinduism. Everyone's forgotten. So this Leela idea is one that's universal. So that to me is what makes the most sense.
This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.